Hello, all you out there. This is Scott Trout, host of Between Two Worlds. This is a podcast about belief, unbelief, and everything in between. I am a Christian who is trying to figure out my blind spots in life, and I'm sitting down with a good friend, Hadeel, who I happen to know from church here in Amsterdam. And you've heard a little bit of her introduction in the new fancy introductions I'm currently doing. But Hadeel, thank you so much
Yes.
for joining on the
Thank you
podcast.
for having me. This
Yeah,
is exciting.
it's very exciting. As you can see, I'm currently in my recording dungeon.
This
This
is
is
the
where,
perils of being a new father.
yes, Naomi is not on podcast schedule, and so I have to find a dungeon to do my recordings.
You should train that child in the way she should go. No more dungeons for you.
Soon she'll be on this with me. We'll make
There
this
you go.
together. Yeah.
The family
So,
business.
Hadeel, let's talk a little bit about how we know each other.
Mm,
You already mentioned this game of Werewolf, and
yep.
as I recall, I was originally the mayor, and I was a great
Okay.
mayor, and you became a jealous town citizen
Okay.
and wanted to become the mayor and then turn the town against me. That's how I remember it. Is that how you remember it?
That is definitely not how I remember it. It's a very interesting tone. I appreciate your perspective. However, what I remember from that was you got power hungry yourself, and the voice was really loud. And I thought, so though, mind you, for the listener, I didn't know Scott really before this. It was a Friendsgiving. It was like a
First
small
time.
gathering pre-corona where you could actually be in the same room
Yeah.
together.
We packed
And
a
we were
lot of
playing.
people.
Yeah, there was a lot of humans in a small space.
It was amazing.
It was really great. And we played this game called Werewolf, where if you're not familiar with it, it's like there's somebody who's the mayor, there's somebody who's the werewolf, obviously, there are villagers, and then there's a doctor, and you all are trying to guess who is who. And I think Scott was the mayor first. Like, he got handed the role of the mayor, and he did not do this half-heartedly. Like,
That's
really,
right.
the improv skills came in strong.
I put my
And
heart and soul in that role.
you really did. You really did. There was a lot of like strained like notes that came out of your like.
Well, I don't remember that. I remember just being fluid.
Just well,
Anyway.
I mean, it is from my perspective. So
I appreciate your perspective.
But I just thought immediately when you were going through this, I was like, this is a fun person, and I need to engage in this game that we're playing like very quickly, as much as possible. So then I was like, wait a minute, this is becoming a tyrannical Southern mayor.
Yeah,
I need
Southern.
to bring equality to this group with my diverse perspectives. So then I decided to run on that podium of bringing inclusion and interesting perspectives.
It became heated and political quick, and I was
It
like,
really
this
did.
is too
Yeah.
current. This is too current.
This is too soon, but also not too soon, because it was very good. Yeah.
And just because I had a loud voice and a perfect Southern accent, they decided
accent.
they decided to kill me. Hadeel, then the second time I remember a distinct memory of, how we know each other is from church. So we go to this church called Liberty in Amsterdam. It's an amazing church. They meet in this beautiful building called the Vondelkerk. And being from America, like, I'm not used to these really beautiful old church buildings.
Yeah.
But more than anything, it's just like a really humble group of people who love God and love the city of Amsterdam. And anyway, so we'd had that experience of mayors, and then one Sunday service, I think I stood up and I saw you saw me, we made eye contact, and then we pointed to each other, and that's all we did. But I was like, I think we're friends.
That is exactly what happened.
It was amazing.
It's like the same level of like just a little bit off kilter people, just like seeing each other, clocking it, being like, listen, fellow kindred spirit, we understand each other.
We see each other right now. We pointed.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Hadeel, I've been trying to get you on this podcast for a long time. So
I'm highly sought after. Like everyone wants me on their podcast. This is not true. Please, if you want me on your podcast, I am more than willing to join.
Every hipster podcast.
Exactly. That's my brand, granola.
Okay, so Hadeel, I am excited to get into your story. I actually really don't know it a ton.
Oh.
Maybe I've heard like snippets or whatever from other people, but
yeah.
Yeah. So as you know, this podcast, we're trying to interview people's story of faith and build an audience where people are actually hearing someone from the other side who maybe
Mm,
doesn't believe in Christianity or who has this faith in something different than ourselves or who's agnostic or atheist. And so uh, the beauty of it is, yeah, I think we're really starting to build that. People are like, oh, I've never thought of it that way or this perspective. And then we've got this running theme of between two worlds. So I think you
mm,
have this within yourself as well, where
yep.
this sensibility of like, I'm not fully in this world, I'm not fully in this world.
Mm,
Um, so let's start there, the
yep.
between two worlds thing. How does that fit into your life experience?
Oh man, I can think of so many parallels. I think maybe a bit of context on who I am. I grew up in the United States, as you can probably tell from my accent, um, in Oregon area and then also in Arizona. But I am the byproduct of mission trips, basically. So my dad was a missionary in Jordan, and he had an arranged marriage with my mom, who
Whoa.
is Jordanian Palestinian. So
As a
by
missionary,
nature,
he did?
yeah.
Whoa.
So they were trying to do ministry in the Middle East, and they both were like they knew each other for 3 months. 3 months. I don't know why that came out strange. For three
3 months.
months before they got married, and yeah, that
Whoa.
was kind of the story. And they just kind of, my dad was like, yeah, the first conversation I had with her, I was like, so if we get married, and he was like, that was my opening line. Like,
Like they
I
had
wouldn't
never talked
recommend that.
before.
Yeah, not really, no. So,
Crazy.
I mean, God works miracles, and they are married like what, 30 something odd years later. And
Wow.
they love each other way more now than they did when they first got married,
I bet. It's
which,
like, who are you,
yeah,
stranger?
exactly. But yeah, I think it was really sweet because they just chose to, they were like, yeah, we have similar life purpose. We want to share Jesus and we
Wow.
want to live in a radical way. And sounds like we're kind of aligned. We're on the same page. Let's just go do it together. Which I think is not exactly the way that people do it nowadays. Like it's much more romance driven. And there's
Yeah.
romance. It just came a little bit later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, so that was cool. And by nature as well, like grew up in Washington. So they stopped working in missions officially. So Washington, Oregon area where my dad is from. And just my brother and I were the only half Arab kids we knew. We didn't really know any other Arabs. There were not a ton of diversity where we lived.
Hmm.
So we always just kind of felt like, okay, we're not fully American and we're not fully Arab either. So we're like these third culture kids that live between these two worlds. Oh, did you see the
Hey,
tie-in, guys?
nailed
Uh,
it.
so we live between these two worlds where on one side you have like Christmas Eve with my Arab family, which is loud and chaotic and lots of stuff going on and lots of food everywhere. And then we'd have Christmas Day with my American side of the family, and it was like calm and proper and lots of sarcasm and like witty humor. So I just remember living in that tension between the two things, and yeah, just not looking super Arab either, not what people think
Hmm.
of. So yeah, just my brother and I would say both sort of struggled with that in the U.S. And also we were kind of like middle school age ish when 9/11 happened, and then everyone was afraid of Arabs
Hmm.
because Arab equals terrorist in a lot of people's minds at that time.
Whoa.
So I remember my parents saying, "Guys, don't tell people that you're Arab. Don't tell them." It's a bit hard to disguise that when your first names are Yusuf and Hadil. Like it's not super common. So I was like, "Yeah, I'm not sure what we're gonna say when people ask, where are you from?" Just like, "I'm from
So
America."
did you have some, yeah, hard experiences around that time?
I think I didn't get any direct hate for it for sure at the time. If we did, I wasn't super aware of it. I knew of other people in my family getting like hateful messages,
Hmm.
but no, for me personally, no. But I think it just started making me feel like there's a shame in who I am
Hmm.
and what my ethnic makeup was, and that it wasn't cool to be mixed with Middle East. And you're not technically mixed race; it's just mixed cultures.
Hmm.
So still fully white, but so I'm not really with the other kids who are like half Asian or half black. But yeah, it just kind of felt like, like hummus, it's like kind of white, but it's a little off white. It smells a little garlicky. it's kind of my vibe.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the first start of it, is being aware. And I think that was very helpful for me as a kid, even though it's a horrible thing for a kid to go through, to feel shame about where they're from or their family, or be embarrassed of an immigrant parent. I think it was helpful for me to relate to and also see other people's perspectives that were also in this tension. So most of my good friends were, I mean, like people who were also from other countries, or they had a mom from another country, or yeah, like our house was so international. Like my parents had a ton of friends from all around the world. And so you just, come home and suddenly there's a couple from India who are missionaries in India there. And you're just like, cool, hi, hello. Somebody from Ecuador, somebody from who's living in Australia now. Like our house was so international. And even though we had very little, my parents were always like so willing to give food and time and conversation. And had I not been brought up in a house like that, I think it would have been much different. But I really, really valued that like practice of sitting with people who are very different from you and kind of exploring the tensions of being between two worlds. So yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So interesting. Wait, so I just wanted one clarification. So with the Christmas Eve, Christmas,
Yep.
Your mom's family was also living in the States?
Yeah. So some of my aunts married American guys, and so they came over, and not all of them were there at the time that I was a kid, but one particular, my mom's older sister, was living in Washington State. And then my grandparents also lived in Washington State. So the deal was we would split the families up, and we would have one Christmas Eve at like my aunt's house with all my cousins and me and everybody in their family. And then also go to my dad's side of the family the next day. So yeah, not all of them lived in Jordan. Like a lot of them live in the US now.
Yeah.
But yeah, like definitely a fun time.
And but then all Christian. So you're having
Yeah. So my whole family is at least my more immediate family, or my mom's immediate family. They had a background of both Greek Orthodox and then also Catholic. But then the children of my grandmother basically became more evangelical, or went to the Protestant tradition, which is a big deal. But yeah, they were in that 0.1% of the population of Jordan that is actually like Protestant evangelical.
Wow.
So definitely a very, very tiny population is actually of that faith in the Middle East, at least at the time.
Is it growing now? Is it different?
I'm not sure. I haven't looked up what the stats are now to see like the percentage, but I think the vast majority of the country is Muslim. So like I would say 95% or so.
Yeah.
And then there's like that 10 to 5% that's usually either Catholic or Greek Orthodox or something along those lines. And then there's like that 0.1%, so forth, that's like evangelical Christian. It's not very common, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, like their story, a little bit of like how they converted, but I'm also just curious so both Christian, but then very different ways of celebrating certain things. So I'm kind of curious if there's any fun stories of like what traditions looked like.
Well, I remember my mom saying that the reason why she didn't want to be in the Catholic faith anymore was that she didn't like that she had to keep working, and that she never felt like she was loved or approved by God. And she would try and try and try, but it was always like, you have to go to the priest and confess, and that's your only way to God. And so one of her aunts on like her dad's side was like, you don't have to do that, because in Ephesians it says that by works you're not going to be saved, and it's by the grace of God alone. And she was like, that was such a freeing thought, that I didn't have to be in this constant hamster wheel. And it wasn't like they were always going to church. I think I call them like a CEO, those Christmas, Easter occasion like churchgoers. So they would go around those times, but small traditions like being baptized as a baby. And my mom wanted to be baptized as an adult when she made the decision herself. And that just became a point of contention in the family of like, we've already covered you We already baptized you. Why are you doing this again?
Hmm.
So those are more of the tensions of tradition. Other things like, do you fast for Lent, or do you have Lent practices? And I never grew up with Lent practices of, the 40 days leading up to Easter,
Hmm.
giving up meat or something like that, which was something that my grandmother always did.
Hmm.
But then my mom was like, well, we don't have to do this anymore. Like, it's not a need. But also seeing the benefit now as an adult of like, okay, giving something up for those 40 days is actually a helpful practice
Hmm.
of just getting my mind right. But, to each their own of what helps them get to the point of remembering God's sacrifice for us.
Yeah. No, that's so fun. Even within my family, my mom was raised Catholic.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think my dad's raised like Episcopalian, but then they ended up becoming more, like evangelical. They both had this moment where they're like, I'm going to become a Christian for myself. It's not just
Yeah.
something that I was like raised with. And so even that with their story is pretty interesting. But my mom still had some of these practices that
Oh,
she
really? Okay.
grew up with. So I'm super used to Lent. And I was like, oh, what? Protestants don't do this? It's such a cool thing. Like,
Yeah.
Ash Wednesday and like getting the cross on the forehead and the palms and like and like giving something up for Lent. And
Yeah.
so it's super interesting just how kind of like the blending can happen to create for me like a really vivid, vibrant view of how to connect with God. And so I'm really grateful that my mom still kept some of those things in her sensibility. Yeah.
I think that's like an interesting thing as well to take away, because they're all practices. If it becomes like that central thing of like, this is what it means to be a Christian, then that's where I'm like, this is dubious. But if it's something where it's your conviction of like, this is what reminds my heart to go to God, then that is something that's a good thing. So for some people, they're not comfortable with lighting candles in church because it reminds them of an older, more quote unquote oppressive system that they grew up with, where they felt a lot of trauma or shame. And for other people, lighting a candle genuinely focuses them on God. So I think it's definitely an interesting tension to walk.
Man, yeah, and then trying to lead groups of people without knowing, that just gets so interesting. So I'm kind of curious with your dad and your mom and their different backgrounds. What were some of the different parenting styles that you interacted then with, or the
so many,
slammed into your own household?
Well, I think my dad was quite like wholehearted, like American discipline boy. It was good. And my mom, like, I think anyone that has like Eastern parents of some kind will relate to this of, like the tradition is you live at home until you're married. And then that's not American tradition at all. So that was one thing. My mom also homeschooled us. So that was also not very popular at the time, especially where I lived, where a lot of people were like, that's a bit of an occult thing. And you're like, not really, no. But yeah, so differences like that where like we were learning Arabic at home, and we were cooking Arab food, and like all sorts of like, she ran it like you will know how to run a household. And that was like super important to her, for both my brother and I, which I think is not super common. Whereas I think traditionally in Arab culture, it's not so much of an emphasis to teach the boys how to do things in the house, in the kitchen. She was like, no, you both need to eat. So you should both learn how to cook. And I was like, yeah, Mom, that's
valuable
true.
for him.
Yeah. So, she really taught us how to be curious and like learn how to do things with what you have. So she very much came from a family that's very agricultural in nature, and you scrounge and you're poor. So you got to like get, whatever you have, you make it do. You are creative with which resources you have, which my dad kind of grew up more middle-class American. So when we grew up quite poor, I think there was quite that tension as well, where for my mom, that's pretty normal to be poor, whereas it wasn't really the normal for my dad. So I think that's where the tension sometimes could come in different parenting styles. But yeah, I think most of the time it was my mom was very involved in all the details and still is. But yeah, I think it just reminds me of that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Have you ever
Mm-hmm.
watched that?
Mm-hmm.
That's very similar vibes, like
Wow.
very similar. Like, yeah. That movie, my mom and I will watch it together. Or one of our favorites is Fiddler on the Roof, which is very similar as well.
Wow.
With like the parents weighing in and giving opinions and stuff like that. So yeah, I think at the time I hated it. I hated how involved my mom was. I'm like, oh, mom, please, seriously, leave me alone. Um,
I could see
and
angsty
angsty
teenager
Hadeel.
Hadeel. Yeah.
She was not a joy to know, and I have apologized to my mother since. And mom, if you're listening, I'm so sorry still. Um, but yeah, angsty Hadeel, trying to figure out who you are as a person, but also very much like rules and what felt like legalism as well. So how
Hmm.
do you maintain truth of who God is and practices that are good without also losing the heart of, this has got to be a choice that you make, and it's not just behavior modification, that do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that,
Hmm.
to heart transformation as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't say there are big specific examples.
No, that's
Although
all
there's
really
some
good.
food that my dad will not eat that we're all like, you're crazy. This is amazing.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. But yeah, my dad is a hilarious character. He's the best storyteller ever. Like,
Hmm.
and my mom, she will just help and be whatever you need to be. If you need someone to go shopping with you, she'll go with you. If you need someone to like do your laundry, she'll do it for you. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
she's
She
a
just really
joy.
wants to, yeah, acts of service or
Yeah.
her love language. So, what's the like flying the coop moment look like? Maybe for your
Oh,
family,
yeah.
but like, also, yeah, in the cultures that they're raised in, like, when is that moment where you're released as an adult? Is that ever
Hmm.
happen? Is it revolving around marriage? Like, what's that look like?
Um, well, my brother and I both lived at home during college purely to save money, because college in the United States is so expensive.
Mm,
Um, and I had zero interest in being in debt. So that was my goal, was I just don't want to be in debt. I'm going to work and also be in school, but live at home, which I think was beneficial financially for me. I don't know if it was super beneficial for me as a developing adult, because you don't have as much of the separation. Um, but yeah, my brother moved out of the house when he got a job in Japan. So
oh,
he graduated from college, he got a job in Japan, and then he moved abroad. And that was his first time living outside of the home and also outside of the United States, just
hmm,
all at once, and his first job. So everything all together. And that was like a big mourning moment for my mom. She's like, "Oh, you're leaving and you're not married." I'm like, yeah, yeah, we know. Uh, and then for me, I lived at home still mostly after college as well when I had my first jobs. I think I moved out with a roommate for like a girl that I knew from church. And I was 10 minutes away. And it was like this most heartbreaking moment for my mother. She's like, "Oh, you're so far." And I was like, "Mom, I'm literally 10 minutes away from you."
oh man, so cute.
Yeah. It's so nice to be loved so deeply. That is true. I don't want anyone to hear this and think that I do not appreciate my mom. She is a joy. But then I got this job in the Netherlands because I thought I was looking for a new job. The company I was at was kind of dying. And I just knew, I was like, I got to get a job. This is not good. And I was a bit desperate to do something outside of Arizona and figure out who I am as an adult.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh, I know one person who lives in Amsterdam from my old company. And I just like Googled Amsterdam and visa. and,
Wow.
and the company where I work now came up, and I was just like, oh, I see a job. I'll apply for that. Probably won't get it, but we'll see. And then like a month later, they're like, okay, can you move here in like a month? And I was like, to be honest, guys, I didn't think this was going to work out. So didn't really
Dang.
think about that. But yeah, I think I can.
Wow.
So yeah, I moved with less than a month to prepare. Uh, so I'd lived on my own before a little bit, but I hadn't lived abroad. And yeah, I think one of the big motivations for me was my whole family was so international and understood what it was like to be a foreigner, to be not the dominant culture, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to be the only one that was just super, super monocultural American. So it was a big interest point for me. And I thought, I'll just live here a couple of years and then I'll come back or something. It's been 3 years.
3 years.
So yeah, I think when I left, or when I told my mom that I was going to leave to come here, she said, well, if you leave me, Hadeel, you will break my heart like Yusuf did the first time. It's like dagger, chest, twist. Like it was so difficult because it felt like a betrayal. Like I had betrayed her. But at the same time, she was so happy that she had trained us so well and like given us so much like autonomy to like feel that we could move abroad and to still follow Jesus abroad too. So yeah, my dad was very much like, Hadeel, your mom's going to say these things. It's okay. You're still going to go forward. And I will miss you so much, but also I'm so excited for you. So that I think was like the difference in their parenting styles, which I think they balance each other out quite well. Because I think if it was one versus the other, I don't know if that would either be super helpful for me. I think having them understanding, hey, we were also vagabonds. We also lived across the world. It's not super shocking. That's in your DNA as well. Just live for Jesus wherever you are. And yeah, I think they're pretty happy with how we've turned out. But it's definitely an interesting tension of I think in Arab culture, like your value a lot of the time, and this is not all Arab culture, I would say. I think this is my understanding of it. So some people may have a different experience. Is if you live with your brother or you live with your dad, you need to at least have some male umbrella protecting you. And the fact that I was a single woman moving abroad was the most terrifying thing. Like, you don't have a male umbrella protecting you. Like, your dad's not there. He can't help you. Your brother's not there. You don't have uncles there. And the thing that I came back to with my mom especially was, well, if we believe that Jesus is good, do you not also believe that Jesus is my male covering, that he is the one that will cover me? And it's like, oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's something that I also have to remind myself too, because if you think in terms of, oh, I don't have this, like Jesus is my covering. He is my protection. And that has definitely proven itself true in living abroad for sure.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot more of God in vivid color because you have to depend on him when you don't know the language, you don't know anyone. So yeah, it's kind of the experience of the flying the coop moment.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And I am curious, what has it been like to be in Amsterdam, and how has that, use the word vagabond, which is so, I really like that idea, but unpack that a little bit, and what impact does that status have on your faith? Yeah, how does that play out?
Yeah, I think I've always been a bit jealous of people who really feel a sense of home in a certain place. Like if they feel like, oh, I feel very American and I want to live in Oregon, that's where my home is. I never felt that. And so there's always this jealousy of like, I don't feel that and I don't want to feel trapped by one spot, but I also want a sense of home. So it's living in that tension of like place, like what is place? And especially as a Christian, like, yeah, I think trying to understand like how you live, it impacts how other people see Jesus as well, but not just using the resources of wherever you go and just like tossing it aside, like living and being there and investing with the people there, but also not feeling like this is my full home, because my home is not in this world and none of us have that. So we all have this is not how it's meant to be. And I think that when you're more of a vagabond or you have lived in more places than your hometown, that sense is like increased almost, at least for me, of this is my temporary home and I'm still going to take care of the home, even though it's temporary, because that's what's right and what's good and what is a show of what is my future home. So just because I'm renting my house does not mean that I don't take care of it. It means that I take care of it really well. And until the person who owns it comes back and takes it back. So yeah, like learning and living in that principle as well, because Amsterdam especially is very transient, or at least it was, especially before COVID, where there's a lot of expatriates who come here and live here for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then leave. And it's not necessarily always a bad thing, but it makes me think, what is home? What is place? And when you are in someone else's country, how do you be a good citizen and honoring to that place while you don't know if that is your place permanently? So that's something that I've been like thinking about a lot more recently. And I think the the positive side of COVID is that I've had to slow down and think about those things much more. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not an option to go travel to all the cool European city or
Nope.
countries that were around. And
Yeah.
I mean,
And
even
I was
just
traveling like crazy before. Like before COVID, I worked for a travel like industry. So I would go see people all over the world. And, you know, one day you're in India and one day you're in Taiwan and one day you're planning a trip to go to Peru. And then all of a sudden everything stops and you're like, oh, what is my purpose in being here now? Everyone's thinking about that.
Whoa. Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off. What were you saying?
Well, yeah, I just can totally relate. And I was just even thinking about, we were going to host a ton of people this past summer because it's like we're living now over in Europe. And so then family was going to come and friends were going to come, and like we had a packed summer and then it's just all gone. But then the beauty that came out of that is it made us really invest in Amsterdam. And like, we just had a blast. We were at the park every weekend and like had a ton of barbecues with church people or navigator people. And like, we just really deepened our friendships here in the city. It was like really awesome. It was so cool.
Yeah. I really love COVID is a horrible disease and it's taken a lot of people's lives and it's done a lot of bad things. But I think it's been very encouraging to see the deepening of friendships as well, and the deepening of connections in ways that were not as easily possible because nobody was forced to stop. Because there's this mentality, I think, also, especially in Western culture, of like, do all you can, experience everything, experience the world. But also, we don't want to downplay the fact that the here and the now with the people that are around you and the situation in the area around you is also here and now, and also something that is not meant to be overlooked. We often do, because you just get caught up in the busyness of life.
Do you feel like there's a way to carry that into a post-corona world?
That's a tricky question, because I don't know what the post-corona world will look like. You know, will it be fully back to traveling all the time? There's no restrictions, there's no distancing, there's no masks, none of these things. I'm not sure what it will look like. I think some people will carry the resting rhythms and the deep connections post-COVID. And that's something that I want to make sure that I put into practice, like actually having Sabbath time of just chill. And that doesn't remove your worth and your value, because that's something that I often will measure my value on, is if I'm not moving constantly doing something, obviously I'm not worth something, because I'm not using my 20s to the best of my ability. Whereas God's like, actually, your definition of your worth and your value is found in me, not in how much you travel or how many countries you've lived in or how many places you've been to. So for me, that was a big learning. I don't know if everyone will have that same output post-COVID. They might immediately be like, okay, I'm free, I can go.
Get back to it.
Point.
Uh-oh.
There's pointing happening. Is there a technical problem?
So, Hadeel, I wanted to hear a little bit more about the evolution of your personal faith. And yeah, and I'm sure that this theme of a vagabond or not fully at home in one place or the other, I could see how that could have a thread throughout. But yeah, tell me, what were some of the formative moments in your faith where you realized God was real, or you realized something about yourself in relation to God? And so take me to some of those early moments.
I think I officially prayed the prayer of accepting Jesus into my heart around 4. I think it was in churches, like some Sunday school program. And I didn't know what that meant really, but I think the way that I describe it is a lot of what my upbringing was from that point through like high school. Was I would get a lot of beads, and I didn't really understand what those beads meant. And I was like saving them, I was putting them in a box, but I didn't really know how they all fit together or what were they supposed to fit together. I don't know, but I was given them and I was told to save them, so I saved them. And as I got older and as I experienced other types of like friendships and relationships with people in church and saw hurt and pain and in the community around me, in like socioeconomically with like homelessness and hunger, especially in my area of town. We grew up in a very rough neighborhood where it was near the church, but like people from the church didn't really live in that area. And we were the only ones who did. So you'd walk over to church and there's like a certain shame of not being middle class Christian. And I think that was something that made me feel like, oh, well, are we actually blessed by God because we don't have the same things that everyone else does? And yeah, I think that was a lot of shameful, like shame feelings or feeling like, okay, this is why I'm not accepted, happened in those years. So I was both learning and getting input on the truth and the gospel of who God is and the story of how God loves us, but at the same time seeing the dissonance of my experience and the experience of others around me who weren't accepted in like Christian circles. And I started to use that as a definer of who I am. Like, oh, I'm homeschooled, so therefore I'm not accepted. Or, oh, I'm mixed, so therefore I'm not accepted. Or I'm not this, so I'm not accepted. And then it was in high school, I was 16 at the time, and my friends were all like, hey, let's go on this high school adventure camp. And I was like,